But I want to call some of our Kenyan leaders to just come on stage and join in this conversation and just give us that perspective that we have from Kenya and possibly add on or challenge what they have had from Strive. So I'll ask Bill Handirangu, who's the CEO of Africa's Talking, to please join me on stage. Africa's Talking is a Pan-African technology company that provides technology infrastructure and support to software developers and enterprises with the aim of building a viable entrepreneurial technology ecosystem for Africa. The company's operations span across 18 African markets, including Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire. Bilha is an engineer. She has a BSc in electrical engineering from MIT and a minor in economics. So I think you're in good company, Strive, with your fellow engineer.
Sounds like my degree.
Same degree as you. I'll also invite Darshan Chandaria, who is the CEO of Chandaria Industry. Darshan, if you could join us. Darshan is the group CEO and director of Chandaria Group. Over 10 years, Darshan has built Chandaria Group into a large and diversified conglomerate with over 3,000 people working for them in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, India, UAE, and United Kingdom. He's the youngest honorary doctorate recipient in 2018 in Kenyan and East African history from the United Graduate College and Seminary International USA. And he has also been part, and I think made very famous on our local TV stations, as one of the participants in the KCB Lions Den. Last but not least, I'll invite Polycarp Igade. Polycarp is familiar to many of us. Polycarp, karibu. Polycarp has held many hats, but right now I think he's holding the hat of Executive Vice President, Sales and Marketing at Vivo Energy PLC. Karibu, Polycarp. He has served as a chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Petroleum Institute of East Africa, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and among many other roles. He is also the immediate former deputy governor of the Nairobi City Council, a post which he held before he resigned in January 2018. But he's overall an accomplished corporate executive. He has large commercial enterprises. So thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, do each of you have a mic that is close to you? I think I'll start with the lady on the panel, Bilha, collaborating in Africa. I mean, your organization is a young organization. You are the CEO, a female CEO, working across Africa. What has been your experience? Do you think we are collaborating? And if we are, what are we doing well, and what are the opportunities that exist for us to do better?
Thank you. Do you think we are collaborating? I think that, I don't know if that's the right way to ask the question, but my experience has been that people are looking for the opportunities, and once that's presented, they will collaborate. I'll give you an example. When we started the company, we started out in Nairobi, and the idea was we found that it was very easy for big multinationals to get access to the infrastructure they needed. So they could come to Safaricom, they could go to a bank and get the digital infrastructure they needed. But when you're talking about a young entrepreneur who's looking for SMS gateways or looking for payment gateways, they have this idea, they're sitting in their dorm room in campus, they have no idea where to go to. And so that was actually the reason we started Africa's Talking, because we said we have access to this kind of infrastructure. Is there a way to democratize it? And that was the vision that drove Africa's Talking. And so we started off in Nairobi. But then very quickly, we began to realize if this is a problem that Kenyans have, what about Ugandans? What about Rwandese people? What about the Nigerians? And so that sort of now evolved our vision into a place where we said, you know what? We're going to create a platform that integrates all of the continent. And so our vision is to go across 54 markets. We are currently at 18 markets, so a third way there, but looking to get to 54 markets. And the dream really is if student or someone, a software developer in Rwanda has a fantastic idea that's helping the Rwandese. Let's make it easier for that same solution to go to Nigeria, to go to Liberia, to go to Egypt, without having to worry about, I need to know Sylvia Mulingi at Safaricom and your equivalent at all the telcos. I need to know Joshua Igara at KCB, etc. And all you need to do is just have your skills, have your computer, and we will give you the platform that you require. And so going back to your question around, do people want to collaborate? I think it's innate in them to find the opportunities that are, they'll find the solution. I mean, they'll find the problems. I don't think you need to tell Africans that we have problems. Everyone knows that we have problems, and we want to solve them. But the question is always, do they have the infrastructure? And so the last thing I'll say on that is, I've seen very young companies come to me and tell me, Bill, the day you're in this market, tell me, because we'll come there. And so I've seen very small companies of 2-3 people start off in Kenya, and right now they're in Nigeria. Right now they're thinking about going to DRC because we want to go into DRC. And it's because we've given them the network and made it a lot easier to collaborate. And so bringing back to the conversation we're having today, the question should be, are we creating the infrastructure that's required for Africans to collaborate? And the leaders here, I guess, depending on wherever they sit, do you have an opportunity to make it just slightly easier for an African to operate in your country or in your environment? And if you do that, then I feel like Africans can go wherever they, for as long as the opportunities are given to them, they'll thrive.
Okay, so I'll ask Darshan then to answer that question. So do you think we are creating are we creating the infrastructure that will help us to collaborate? And if we are, what is Chandaria Industries doing in its own space?
No, I think it's a great topic. Thanks, Sylvia. I think, just to add what Bill has said, there's a lot going on, I think, from a collaboration point of view now. When you put on the lens as the private sector, you look at it as the government, you look at it as different stakeholders, everybody's doing quite a lot. I think the question is around synergies. So how are some of these synergies being tapped to really create the outcomes that we're looking forward to? Moving specifically to the private sector and as Chandaria Industries, on the back of Lion's Den, as a simple example, I think that was really the stimulus to start Chandaria Capital, our venture capital fund. The venture capital fund I founded in 2017. We are seeing opportunities across the continent and beyond now, which is great, I think. For other examples, we sit on the board together at Endeavor.
Yes.
Africa's Talking is one of our entrepreneurs and companies there. I think providing the right kind of support to promising businesses, we always sit back and say it's great to support entrepreneurship, but the question really is, which are, the real companies that have the potential to become the next multinationals, the next big companies that, will leave legacies on the continent. And I think that stems a lot from the support we give the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So speaking more as private sector, and as Chandaria Industries and Group, from a personal perspective and as, from the group perspective, it's all about saying, how are we going to provide the right infrastructure and the right kind of support to make sure that promising entrepreneurs like Africa's Talking are, stories and success stories that will live on for generations to come.
Okay, fantastic. I think part of that infrastructure and the ecosystem that we must create is also really around the support that we get from the economies that you operate in terms of the regulation that we find, and the space that is basically made for the organizations to be successful. Yesterday evening, Strive shared with us an interesting story around Econet and the process he went through in Zimbabwe. And I just want to pose this question to Polycarp, because probably you are the among all of us who are here, you're the one who has had the privilege of serving on the government side, working in terms of your service at Nairobi County, and then also being an accomplished corporate executive. How do you find the bridge between the two? Are we building the right infrastructure that is driving the collaboration? And I know you've been quite outspoken about this, so I wouldn't want you to hold back and tell us your perspective.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for that question. I think the mission of the private sector and the mission of public sector is the same. Yes, there is a bit of divergence in terms of execution, the execution mandate. When you're in the public sector, there's a lot of debate. And there's a lot of consultation that comes with it. In the private sector, you get it done. You basically get it done. But that consultative nature is very important in the public sphere, because you want to make sure no stone left unturned, if I can use that cliche, and no one left behind. But in terms of Africa, I think the collaboration has started. As a young man traveling across Africa as a salesman, we had, for instance, had to go to Europe to go to Nigeria. I don't know how many of us remember that. That's not too long ago. You couldn't find a direct flight from Nairobi to Lagos. you had to go either to London or find your way to Dubai. Today, if you look at Africa, in terms of movement, and I capture what Strive said earlier, visiting one another is very important, and I enjoyed to listen to his story about visiting. So today in Africa, you have 3 hubs. You can go to any country out of Johannesburg, you can go to any country out of Nairobi, you go to any country out of Addis Ababa. And we in East Africa are even much luckier, especially we in Kenya, because you can go to Africa in 5 hours from anywhere. We are really central, so we are lucky like that. So, and that is an issue of policy. I think it took a lot of government policy to allow inter-African flights. I also think inter-African trade has started, and I enjoyed listening to Joshua talking about the challenge President Kagame set himself up and reminding us the numbers around the Africa Free Trade Area. I think the regional blocks are coming together. You have SADC in the Southern Rim, you've got the East African Community here, you've got ECOWAS on the western side. On the northern side, they also have part of the Arab League. We are starting to see that come through together. So the public sector is providing the environment. But sometimes I think in private sector, what I find is we whine a little bit too much. We actually don't see the opportunity that governments are trying to create. And we need to engage governments with solutions. Like I think C.S. Matiang'i told us this morning, his words were exactly this: identify the pain out there in others, and then try and resolve that pain, try and deliver, that's how you make a difference. But we must identify the pain that government is going through in private sector and go to them with solutions and keep on asking. I always say when we meet people in government, let's ask them, of the 3 solutions we presented last week or last month or the year, how many have you implemented? But usually we go crying. There is no market for tears. There has never been, and there will never be. There's only a market for solutions. And that's coming again, closing my comments by saying the biggest collaboration we really need is the collaboration of young people. Because Africa, for lack of a better word, I like the statistic we were given of 19.7 from Strive. Africa is pediatric, it's young. Because if you go into that age set and look even further, people below the age of 15 are even younger. But we are all, if you go to every African government, this is where government and politics confuses me. You find a Ministry of Youth. For what purpose? Actually, what you need is a Ministry of Geriatrics. Those are the people who are few. Because what you're trying to do is pitch. You're trying to pitch that young people are needy. They're not needy. They are the population. And young people need to wake up and stop pretending that they are needy or they need to be given pesky dust. To just stand up and get it done. It is your season, it is your country, it is your... Thank you. So, take courage. That's what I heard us being told this morning. Take courage. And taking courage is fear and faith, which are 2 other themes I had earlier this morning. Overcome the fear. By overcoming a fear, it means you believe there is a God. So you have faith there is a God for you to face this fear. And as I keep on saying, you've referred to me in politics. I used to say in public sphere, and when you're in public life, and even when you're in leadership, God's fools, because human beings, when you're courageous, think you're a fool. God's fools have never lost to the devil's genius. And that story and that theme is everywhere in the Bible. Thank you.
Okay, I think the time is well gone. I want to ask the panelists one last question, but then I'm also inviting you to just share your questions. We'll probably take 1 or 2 questions, and maybe Wahigo, Yvonne, you can help me to pick out what are the quick questions coming in for the panelists through Mentimeter.
I'm here for you.
And then after that, I can ask maybe one last question, then we close.
Sure, no worries. So your questions coming in, remember that code is 81212. Let's take one here. Igathe, transition from private to sector is hard but needed. What's your advice on how to transition and make impact? I don't know if it means what, private to public or public to private, because you've done a little bit of both.
Allow me to again steal directly from C.S. Matiang'i. It's doing what's right. That helps you. Because the skills, in fact, you need to ramp up the skills you have in private sector to serve in public sector. Because it's the same thing. The mission is the same. It is to serve and to also keep an attitude of gratitude that you've been given an opportunity to serve. Because even we in private sector also continue to serve.
Okay. All right, here's another one. Agriculture has been focused as the next generation of billionaires. Zeroing down to Kenya, how is Kenya supporting the growth of agriculture, whereas we depend on cheap importations from other countries, for instance, maize and eggs as the private sector, I suppose?
I'll probably ask maybe Strive. I know you're very passionate about agriculture, to probably speak about the work that you're doing and specifically what relates to Kenya.
I'm passionate about everything I do because I'm an entrepreneur. If I can't be passionate about it, then I don't do it. But you know, and when I'm asked to do something, I'm all in. So I was asked to help set up an organization called AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And this week I stepped down as chair of AGRA. So I was there from the beginning for the 15 years. And it was a privilege to serve under the late Kofi Annan as the first chair. And then I took over some 10 years ago. It gave me an extraordinary insight into agriculture and what needs to be done. First of all, when we set up AGRA, we chose Kenya as the headquarters for AGRA. So here we have about 150 people work for the organization based here. It's a gathering of scientists, policymakers, and experts in the field of agriculture. I'll just share one simple statistic with you, which I shared this week. Being the engineer, I'm looking at my numbers all the time. When we started AGRA, we realized that if we were to increase agricultural productivity, we had to deal with the area of fertilizer and seeds. So to give you an idea, only 3 African countries outside South Africa were producing hybrid seed. Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Kenya. It was 2,000 metric tons a year. And there were less than, I think there were about 3 or 4 companies in metric seeds. So we raised money, about $250 million, to build a new seed system. Today there are 110 seed companies across Africa. Now wait for it. 110,000 metric tons a year is now being produced in seed. Now, that much seed, what does it do? What does it mean? Well, it's the equivalent of feeding 15 million families every day. Fertilizer use, global average is over 3. The industrialized countries, the United States, some of the Asian countries, are between 200 and 500 kilograms per hectare. When we launched AGRA, Africa was averaging 4 kilograms per hectare. We are now at about 20 kilograms per hectare as an African average, and the leading countries like Kenya are as high as 52 kilograms per hectare. Of course, South Africa is a lot higher. So, for me, the basic infrastructure to produce food in Africa is actually now in place. The fundamental building blocks. We've looked at the design of the way what farmers need. The pieces that are left are all in the space of political will. Okay? We've got to fix the financing system of how agriculture is financed. I used to joke with President Obama that if our farmers paid for finance at the cost that if your farmers had to pay what our farmers pay, you would be hungry too. Because it's exorbitant. It's not structured correctly right across the entire continent. The other piece is markets. The irony is if we doubled today food production, the markets would collapse. The prices would collapse because our markets are not structured correctly. So we're almost hitting a ceiling, which is a false ceiling. Because we've lost our own markets. So in key areas like rice, chickens, and so forth, because whilst we were not producing, others came to occupy those market spaces. Okay, so that is going to be in the area of political will. That is why I went off to work on areas like the African Continental Free Trade Area. I was a member of the I still am, the task force for reform at the African Union level. Because it is clear now we have to unlock the African markets themselves and be able to move food, agricultural products. Then we have to look at the entire value chain. Extremely important to look at that value chain, particularly if we are to bring young people into agriculture. So I could spend the whole day, as you can see, I've been passionate about this for a while, but I stepped down this week as chairman, but I'll still be hanging out there as an entrepreneur.
Okay, but then let me just pick something from there. So for Darshan, I'd just like you to get your perspective from what he has spoken about in terms of the opportunity to be able to unlock that from an agriculture perspective. Are you seeing the same in manufacturing? And then Bilha, are you also seeing the same in the technology space?
So I think, I completely concur with what Strive said. I think it's, again, talking about the synergies and how do you align all of these to make sure that every stakeholder is getting a fair chance at delivering on their mission and on actually in a cost-effective way. So for example, in manufacturing, we always talk about competitiveness. We always talk about the cost of manufacturing. Now, it's one thing to sit there and say the cost of electricity is too high without actually understanding what is happening on the back-end infrastructure to actually help that, or being an active player, for example, in the manufacturing space. It's another to say, okay, my market's getting competitive, and actually I think Strive spoke about this earlier. When your home country starts getting competitive, when you feel that you have the potential to go outside your home country and the rest of Africa to grow your business, you must. I think also from a perspective of understanding your consumer, I think I also like what was said about when you're born in Africa doesn't mean you understand Africa. We all, when we see some international investors and we look at them and say, oh, wow, I don't think these guys know anything sitting in their offices in London, in Dubai, etc. But have we ourselves really understood the structural issues, on the continent? Do we actually go out, engage with people in a structured way and understand what they're saying and convert it into feedback? So I think what I'm saying, sort of here is getting certain things right and not just complaining, back to also what Polycarp was saying about the issues we have, and actually becoming a change agent and becoming an active participant in contributing to what we need to do to have more of a positive impact is very important. So I think from a manufacturing perspective, I think Kenya has led from an East African perspective. But if we were to pick up the biggest manufacturing businesses here and place them in South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, how would we compete? And that's the big question we need to ask ourselves.
Okay, good.
Technology is interesting. And I think if anyone is in government or trying to figure out what to do with the youth, I'll tell them, think about technology. And there are many reasons, but one thing I'll say is this. It's one thing that is actually becoming homogenized or flat in the globe. The reason I say that is for you to do manufacturing or agriculture, there's a lot that's focused on the particular country you're in and all the different macroeconomic factors. But technology allows you to be seated in anywhere for as long as you have a decent internet connection. And with all the online resources that are coming up, etc., and all the the cutting edge technologies that are coming up, you can pretty much learn the newest technology that's coming out of Silicon Valley, sitting in Kigali, or wherever it is you're sitting in Africa. And the reason I say that is that it becomes an easier, and I use the word easier, I'm just using it, but it's not necessarily easy. I mean, of course, there's a lot of other factors to consider. But it's one of the easiest tools, I think, to get people engaged, because all you need to do is ensure that we have a decent internet access. Of course, now these issues of like power, can you even afford a computer, etc. But once that's done, and you have we keep talking about the youth dividend, you have a lot of smart people. They could actually learn the same things that students in Japan or in the US are learning, because that's the one thing that the internet has actually allowed us to do. I don't necessarily need to travel, like before you had to like leave the continent to actually go to some other country to learn their technologies. Right now, a lot of that stuff actually exists online. And so going back to your question, I can see us being able to get to where, quote unquote, people are saying, oh, you should try and get to where the US or all these other countries are in. I don't think that's necessarily where we should be trying to get to. I think the idea should be looking at our own continent, what are the things that we need to solve for ourselves, come up with solutions that actually work for ourselves. And the good thing with technology is you can actually do that without necessarily having to do a lot of investments. We still need to do a lot of investments, and the government, for example, can't be let off the hook. Recently, I was reading the story of how we finally got fiber optic cable laid in Kenya, and what it took for the then President Mwai Kibaki to make the call and actually make sure that happens. And I can tell the difference. I mean, prior to 2008, when we were accessing the internet using satellites and just how slow it is, it's not great right now, but it's a lot better. I can sit in, we can sit in our offices right now with my engineers, and we can pretty much be accessing servers across the world and doing all sorts of interesting things that, of course, were not possible before this happened. So there is a place that government and all these other people have to play in ensuring that the right infrastructure and the right backbone is in place. But I think once that's laid, we can actually begin to unleash the genius of Africans, because now they can actually, you don't necessarily need to be sitting outside Africa to solve your problems. You can actually solve them at wherever you're seated.
Okay. I don't think we have time for, do you have time for another question? Because I'd like them to give their closing word.
Yeah, I think we need to have the close now.
Okay, fine then. All right, so as a round of applause for our panelists. Yeah. But, there's so much wisdom and so much experience in years that is on stage. And I just want to ask you, as you look out to the audience, and especially to the young people, to the entrepreneurs, many of them who are probably in their early journeys, some of them have probably been on longer journeys and have had different experiences. As you address them, what would be the closing word that you'd like to leave? Remember that you're planting a seed, and you've just told us, Tribe, about the power of a seed in unlocking abundance. What would be your closing word? I don't know. Polycarp, do we start with you?
You're the luckiest crop ever born. You are living in a time where the opportunity in Africa far exceeds the risk. Go out there and fetch that opportunity. Then secondly, what is standing between you reaping the opportunity and where you are is also genuinely developing yourself, getting out into the field with courage, failing, yes, but fail quickly, don't fail slowly. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Darshan?
I saw a question on mentorship come up, and just quickly to talk to that a little bit. I get a lot of people who I speak to, I sit down with them, and the first 20 minutes is explaining what they do. And then the next part of the mentorship session is, will you invest in my business? So mentorship is not only about accessing capital. It is also about networking, learning. I can tell you when I first came back from my studies in 2009, when I saw names like Joshua, Polycarp, Sylvia at an event, no matter what, I would make sure I went to listen, network, understand, and just learn from people. So I think, in closing, what I want to say is, sometimes being fixed about what you're looking for isn't the solution to success always. Success is not a destination, it's a continuous journey. And meeting people, networking, and I think visiting the continent, as Strive said earlier, is very, very important. And I can tell you, in today's technologically advanced world, if people 15 years ago could interact, learn, travel to Dubai and London to go to Nigeria, whereas we have a direct 5-hour flight there, there is no reason why we shouldn't be grabbing the opportunities with both hands. Thank you.
Thanks. So people often ask me, did you know you'd be doing this, or did you set out your career to kind of be in this, where you are right now? And I would definitely be lying if I told them that I had, how they'd ask you, what's your 5-year goal plan, what's your 10-year goal plan? I guess there are people who have that, just never had it, or just never got to be able to do that. But I think one of the things I've learned, and maybe what I'd like to leave with the audience, is that many times where you end up is very much a decision, or so it's very much a result of the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. And wherever you find yourself having been placed by God, if you can look at the opportunity at that point and figure out what's the best I can do, what can I learn from this, how do I become a better person by this opportunity? You might not, because you might not really see what tomorrow will, what tomorrow holds. You might not be able to tell what 5-10 years down the line holds. But if every single day that's given to you and you're able to come in, better yourself, learn from whatever opportunities are given to you that day, tomorrow will come and you'll actually become a better person, and you'll find yourself actually arriving at whatever destination people keep saying is a destination. But it's not because you've necessarily made the plans out there, but it's because every single day you actually made the choice that needed to be made. And then that led you to the next choice, and that led you to the next choice, or to the next opportunity. So that ability to just kind of always be in the moment and make the best of every single moment that you find yourself in, I think is important.
Thank you. Strive.
I'll be brief. This is the dream that I wanted to see. When I listened to the three of you, I wonder what it will be like 30 years from now. But it gives me extraordinary hope, because I know it's not unique. When I listen to young people across Africa, whether I'm in Nigeria, I was in Ghana this week, they're talking just like you guys. Build the bridge between you. The technological platforms, you have everything you need. Like your colleague said, there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in Africa than now. And of course, tomorrow will be even better. But we have to build on that hope. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me back to Kenya. Let's go out and entrepreneur it, as I've said. My mantra is simple. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, identify a human need and reach out to solve it in a sustainable way. That's what entrepreneurship is. If you want to make money, go find yourself a good job. Because that's not entrepreneurship. Let's focus on solving the challenges and the problems that people are facing every single day. And guess what? You'll make a bit of money along the way, because that is what should be the effect of doing it well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, my panelists.
Thank you.